Good morning, everyone. I'm a legal expert. I normally work on water diplomacy, transboundary water cooperation. But as a legal expert, of course, I'm very interested in all these looming legal issues over freshwater resources, and this was really one of them. So I conducted this research while I was studying in UCL, and really the aim of this research was to get a first idea of what could be the bodies of international law that could be applicable to this continental shelf aquifers, so aquifers located offshore. And also then to think of how we could move forward from these observations. So what am I talking about? So my research was based on an article published in end 2013 in Nature, which was a compilation of decades of marine hydrogeology studies, and showcasing that, the results showing that you have major resources of fresh brackish groundwater resources located offshore, so in the continental shelves, in the seabed. So vast aquifer resources in the continental shelves. So continental shelves, it starts so at the end of the territorial sea from the 12 nautical miles and extends from the baseline up to 2,200 nautical miles or up to the outer edge of the continental margin. So that's the seabed and subsoil under the exclusive economic zone. Part of these resources are fossil. Some groundwater resources are linked to land-based water resources. Others are fossil, which means non-renewable. You pump into them and there is, they don't recharge naturally. They talk in this study about fresh brackish water using a threshold of the upper limit that you use to define brackish water resources in desalination. And an interesting point, the volume of these water reserves, they are estimated, it's a very large estimate, 2 orders of magnitude the volume extracted from what has been extracted from land-based aquifers in the past 100 years. So to give you an idea, in the past 100 years we extracted about 4,500 cubic kilometers of groundwater, and the rough estimate there varies between 300,000 and 500,000 cubic kilometers of fresh brackish water. So this is a map from the article showing that these occurrences of vast aquifers happens really around the world. So in red you have these vast meteoric groundwater reserves that have been observed by direct observational data. The rest in red and green and blue shows either some groundwater where you have just a freshwater mixing component, or other groundwater freshwater reserves but with no direct observational data. Why does it matter? Well, you have several reasons why this research really matters. The first of them is that it really completely challenges our view of our traditional, a bit narrow view of the water cycle. I took just the graph of the USGS, but other graphs are usually a little bit the same. You see, somehow that you have some groundwater flow that gets into the ocean and so on, but you don't have really, they are like these offshore aquifers are not taken into account in the way we view our water cycle, which means also that these resources are also forgotten in public international law instruments. Laurence Poisson-Choiseul was talking about about iceberg and atmospheric freshwater resources, saying they are forgotten, but these ones as well, and they represent an important stock of water. So there is really a legal loophole as to how to explore, exploit, thank you, protect these resources. Another reason why it matters, well, we are facing a global water crisis. Water resources are under stress, and it's especially the case in coastal zones. A few figures from UNEP. You have already 50% of the world population that's located within 60 kilometers of the sea. And 3/4 of all large cities in the world are located on coasts. When we know that coastal zone will face the largest migration pressures. Another data from also OECD showing that between 2000 and 2050 we can also expect an increase in global water demand by 55%. So this gives you an idea of this water crisis. And finally, last point, why this research is quite interesting, is that the technology is available. We are already extracting produced water from oil and gas platforms. We are injecting CO2 in saline offshore aquifers and so on. This research estimated that it's also economically viable compared, for example, to desalination. But a lot of uncertainties and unknown remains. You need more technical studies. You have to take into account that you have a huge stock, but it's like on land-based groundwater resources. You can only extract a small portion of this water. Part of it is fossil, as I said. It's non-renewable. It's unsustainable extraction of water. Other factors that could be taken into account, the fact that some people argue that groundwater pumping contributes to sea level rise with consequences such as displacement and relocation. And you can have, when these continental shelf aquifers are linked to land-based groundwater resources, you could also have some potential impact on the onshore water tables. Also, I really do believe that it's not an excuse not to really focus on and avoid the challenges we faced with our land-based water resources. We first have to really focus on better managing our land, surface and groundwater resources in a more efficient and sustainable manner. But depending on the context, it could be eventually a solution for a certain country or certain countries if you have a cross-border aquifer. Thank you. So in order to ensure proper protection and proper regulation of these resources, you need to address this legal loophole. So I won't have time to go into details, but I just wanted to have a first idea of what could be relevant, what could be applicable. So I looked at the characteristics of these aquifers and thought about 3 main bodies of international law that you can think of. Because of their geographical location, the law of the sea appears as, like prima facie, one of the main bodies of international law. Mainly the UNCLOS that gives some definition of what is a continental shelf, what are the natural resources in the continental shelf, what are the rights and obligations of the countries in these continental shelves on natural resources. Regarding how these, in the case of these water resources that in case a continental shelf aquifer would be shared would extend over different maritime zones of different countries. And in case you would necessitate some offshore exploitation, not from the onshore, as it could be also possible, then you could think of cross-border, by analogy to the cross-border petroleum cooperation agreements. like not the Energy Charter Treaty. Maybe I should have put that a bit more clearly. But and finally, because of the nature of the resource, you're talking about water, you're talking about a vital resource, you're not talking about oil or gas. Well, it's a legitimate question to ask whether international water law could influence. Other rules also could apply. So the idea, I think, what could practically happen in the case of cross-border continental shelf aquifers is that countries would use the law of the sea and these energy, oil and gas cooperation agreements. But I think it would be really important to set up also some practical legal tool which could set an overall frame for the protection and management of these resources. For example, through the setup under the International Law Commission of a working group which could discuss and address this legal loophole and maybe come up with an idea of a resolution recognizing the importance of this strategic resource. So just, as a conclusion, it's really a fascinating, forward-looking topic that needs more studies, more technical studies, more legal studies on that. We should remember that it's a fragile, partially non-renewable vital resource. And we should really look into having this legal umbrella ahead of potential exploitation of these resources. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.